Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, JavaScript, the Security Concern Answered. My name is Danielle Wombolt, and I'll be your moderator. I work on the marketing team here at NPM, and I'm excited to be hosting today's session. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Adam Baldwin. Adam is the VP of Security here at NPM, and Adam was also the founder of Lift Security, which NPM acquired last year. Before I hand it over, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about the presentation in the BrightTalk webinar platform. First, today's webinar will be recorded on demand after the live session and is accessible through the same link you're using now. We've also added some attachments which are available through the Attachment tab at the bottom of your screen. This is where you can find today's deck, a link to the full survey results, and other related content, including NPM's blog and upcoming webinars. Next, we'll love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for Adam, please feel free to send it through the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of your player. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session, but please feel free to submit your questions at any time. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. Now over to Adam.
Thanks, Danielle. Let's see. Let's get started here. Hi, as Danielle mentioned, I'm Adam Baldwin. I'm the VP of Security at NPM. I also founded the Node Security platform, and that platform was acquired by NPM this last year. And for the last 7 years, I've spent my time dedicated to the security of the JavaScript ecosystem and Node.js. So let's get to our agenda. Today we're going to talk about what is NPM. Hopefully you're already a little bit familiar with this. Talk about JavaScript supply chain security, why that matters to all of us, and incorporate into that a little bit of our insights from our 2019 developer survey, and also talk about how NPM, the NPM security team, and our products and services can help there. And then, of course, at the end, do a Q&A session as we have time. So what is NPM? Well, NPM, first and foremost, is a company. It's NPM Inc. We deliver enterprise products and solutions to help the JavaScript ecosystem thrive. It takes a lot of effort to keep this ecosystem going. We have a website for discovery and collaboration on packages in JavaScript. And most developers know us for the CLI, the command line interface that they use and love every day to rapidly develop applications and bring dependencies into their applications. And of course, it's all backed by the public registry, this amazing corpus of reusable JavaScript that lets developers build fast. In fact, it's roughly 976,000 published packages, roughly 8.9 million package versions, individual versions. Just an amazing amount of reusable code. 2.1 billion downloads per day of this corpus, and 7,700 package publishes per day. It's an ecosystem that's moving incredibly fast, and this is an important thing to remember as we get a little further into our presentation. It really signals everyone's using JavaScript. 11 million developers of NPM registry, 100 of the Fortune 100, which we actually checked, 50 large financial companies, tech companies, and of course, 500 of the Fortune 500, we're pretty sure, as well as governments, foreign and domestic, financial institutions, you name it, JavaScript is being used for application development. I think you get the point here that everyone is using JavaScript and then it's moving up at a high velocity. Why are those numbers so big? Let's look at the supply chain to an application and kind of just go into that. So everything starts with your application, right? A business problem to be solved, and that's the starting point. And with NPM and JavaScript, you could rapidly bring in dependencies. You bring in these packages from the public registry into your application, and those provide a way to rapidly develop and prototype and glue those together to solve your business problem. Of course, dependencies themselves have dependencies. I think about it like an iceberg. You see the top, which is your application and your top-level dependencies that you have there, and then everything else is kind of below the waterline and out of sight, out of mind. In fact, 97% of the code in a modern web application comes from NPM. that means that small piece that you're writing, your developers are writing, is glue code. It's stitching all those modules together, but it makes up a very small portion of the actual deployed code base. And to relate that to you, to an enterprise, we're looking at 20,000 dependencies used by a typical enterprise, right? A large corpus of software that you have to inventory and think about. And the thing beyond those dependencies that I think is extremely interesting is that in the foundation of that entire supply chain is maintainers. People, humans maintain these modules. And you have thousands of developers that don't work for you that are shipping code to production. This code is coming from a maintainer to the public registry. It's being brought in behind your firewall, behind your security controls, executed on developer workstations, executed in production with access to your customer data and access to your production systems. So that's the supply chain. And so let's take a look at what some of these packages are bringing in with themselves as they cross from the public into your private space. First thing are vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities, security flaws that are found in the packages, right? And we surveyed these 33,000 participants in our developer survey earlier this year, and 83% of them were concerned about the open source software that they use. Not sure about the other 17%, but 83% were concerned about that. And we also did a survey of 8 large banks, and we looked at 23 million downloads and 22,000 packages that were being consumed by these financial institutions, and we came up with 824 of them had vulnerabilities, 3% of those packages, and 55 of those were critical vulnerabilities, something that could be exploitable and something you need to know about that's coming into your environment. This is a really interesting perspective on, we got this large corpus of software. Of course, the more software we have, the more we're bringing in, the more potential there are for bugs and vulnerability and security vulnerabilities. We looked at what methods do organizations use or developers use to ensure the security of their code. And what's interesting to me is across the board, everything is up. That's great because more attention is being paid to security, which is good. But you see, we're still heavily relying on code review, this sort of necessary but very difficult and expensive process. Of course, we're doing scanning and auditing, but this code review, that 7,700 publishes per day number is really important when you get to here, because how are you going to keep up with this sort of shifting sand underneath your application with all of the publishes happening when you're doing sort of manual code review? And typically, I would have to say that most of this code review is happening of the glue code, of that 3% of the code that's shipping, versus being able to keep up with all of the dependencies sort of moving underneath your application. So to address this a bit, we incorporated NPM, we built NPM audit to find and fix vulnerabilities in your JavaScript dependencies for users of NPM and NPM Enterprise, right? It allows you to go down that entire dependency tree, right, to analyze for advisories that are in our database, these known vulnerabilities and packages. And this NPM audit tooling is backed by the NPM security team, as well as that corpus of 11 million users of our registry, right? We have bridged the communities between security and our developer ecosystem to bring information to you and to the enterprise faster, right? We have a report a vulnerability button on every page in the NPM website. That goes to our security team for triage, which means that maintainers get a very high accurate signal. We don't send them just garbage, right? So the garbage gets batted down. And that way, when we get it out to our tooling, hopefully it's going to make a positive impact and allow you to find and fix things within your projects. So that's security vulnerabilities. Let's go on to another risk that's getting brought in from the public registry into your own private space, and that's malware. And when I talk to developers and CTOs and CSOs, and I ask what they're most afraid of. It's malware. It always comes up that we're scared about that malicious package that's designed to, disrupt or damage our business. And malware gets brought into the registry, and anybody can publish to the registry. There's no barrier to entry. There's no, special test that you have to take to publish. So anybody can do that. The trick with malware is that you have to get somebody to install it. And that's where attacks like typo squatting, where you make a slight variant in spelling of a module and you make it look like another module, and then you try to get it installed either by accident or through some other social engineering method. And we have automated ways that we've built to sort of like bat down some of these typo squats, and so we try to eliminate them from the registry. Even if you're going to accidentally install something, it's probably not going to have a big impact. The next one is account compromise, actually getting malware into a popular package. Because of that nested dependency tree, you could compromise one of those human maintainers that has a bad security hygiene, bad password, something like that, and get access, publish malware into the registry that way. Let's look at this malware sort of like trend over time in the registry, and we're looking at over 2017, 46 instances of malware we have published in our advisory database, 68 for 2018. We're only partway through 2019. We're already up to 2017 numbers. I think, as you can see, this is probably going to continue to trend up as it becomes a useful target, because the supply chain is a useful target to your enterprise. You may be doing everything right, but maybe one of those maintainers of the thousands of packages you use has bad security hygiene, and it allows for a targeted attack against an organization. But also, when you look at the comparison of numbers and the amount of packages that get published versus the number of packages in the registry versus the malware numbers, we're looking at still pretty low numbers, although I do expect to see that trending up. To take care of some of this malware, we're investing heavily in sort of automated threat detection solutions where we can take published packages, run them through runtime analysis, hybrid analysis, static analysis, to provide insights that get to your NPM enterprise fast, so that you can have that information to make decisions about whether you want to use a package, upgrade to a package, install a package, things like that, or whether we want to remove it completely from the registry. As we said, protecting those accounts is one of the most important things we can do, because if you get access to a maintainer's account of a popular package, that's where you can do a lot of damage. And so we've invested into two-factor authentication and protecting, about 50% of all downloads are protected by two-factor auth, and 7% of all maintainers have two-factor auth enabled. We're working to get that number up, of course, and incentivize that, because anything we do to protect the public registry also protects the enterprise. Packages have two-factor auth enforcement options as well. If you're a maintainer of a popular package, but you want to collaborate with others, you can require that your other maintainers have this enabled. Of course, we have sensitive data protection to revoke tokens that may be published in NPM packages. And we're going to be expanding this effort very soon, so be watching the blog for an announcement on some other things we're going to be doing here around sensitive data protection and protecting those valuable tokens to the NPM registry. And of course, with NPM Enterprise, you can take more account control with SSO, with different vendors, any popular sort of OIDC provider there. So lots of control and that you're getting from NPM Enterprise. But finally, let's talk about a risk that I think doesn't get talked about enough. We talk about vulnerabilities, we talk about malware, but this is also one of those risks that creeps into an organization. This is a business risk, right? License and compliance issues, and it often gets forgotten about. So in our survey, let's just look at what our users thought about this in their perspective. What does an NPM package license impact, or does an NPM package license impact your decision to use it? The answer is yes. 58% of respondents say yes, it actually impacts the decision to use it. Does your company prevent or prohibit you from using certain licenses? Again, a high degree of yes, over the majority, 55% yes. And then which licenses do get prevented? We've got unrecognized licenses, we've got code without a license, GPL, AGPL, sort of these restrictive licenses that you know, brought into a project may require you to contribute changes back, may require you to open source the application that it was brought into, potentially risks if it's a commercial venture, right? So that's definitely license risk is an important one to get a handle on. It's all about knowing what's there. We did an analysis of sort of that same corpus of data from the 8 big banks, and there was a lot of different licenses in there. Out of those packages, we saw 15 different licenses that would have to be, legal reviewed and understood about where they're being used. MIT, of course, was the most popular license, but just like a vulnerability, there was at least one, there's just about a percentage of unlicensed and GPL-based licenses present that may be restrictive or cause issues for an organization, depending upon how that's being used or the risk tolerance of the organization. So we talked about those 3 things that are getting brought in from the outside, right? The JavaScript supply chain, when you're bringing in this code, you have these vulnerabilities, potential malware, and also, potential license risk, as well as we talked about sort of the tooling, the NPM audit tooling that helps you find and fix vulnerabilities within your projects. And then we talked about some of the efforts that the NPM security team and NPM has in place to protect accounts and identify malware and things like that. And as it turns out, businesses have compliance, security, and oversight needs that must be met when using open source. NPM's our product philosophy is simple, that we offer on top of NPM workflow that developers already love. With that in mind, we created NPM Enterprise. It's a way for you to gain control over your open source usage, to reuse code within your enterprise, to have your dedicated search and discovery for collaboration internally. Of course, account control with single sign-on and premium support, and all wrapped up in a single tenancy dedicated deployment, as well as all of the really amazing security and compliance features that I just can't quite tell you about, but are going to be coming very soon. To recap, you're using a lot of JavaScript. That JavaScript creates security and compliance risk for your organization and for your users. And NPM Enterprise can help by giving you your own private space to assert control over your open source consumption. That's all I had for you today. I hope you got some questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Please submit your questions in the bottom of your screen in the Ask a Question tab. And it looks like we do have a couple of questions. The first one, does NPM catch vulnerabilities earlier than other entities, companies, and why?
So we have something that's amazing, and I hinted at it, and that's our NPM security team and our 11 million users. That's a lot of eyeballs in source code. And so we have pushed to be able to have those vulnerability reports and triage them as fast as possible to get them into our tooling. So from that perspective, we try to be fast, we try to be thorough, but we don't want to be so fast that we're providing you a very poor signal. We want high quality data so that you can make good decisions. The other thing is that we've built our tooling to push as far left as we possibly can to the developers, so that they're seeing, hey, I need to update this particular package. Oh, I can run NPM audit fix, and it just automatically bumped my dependency to a fixed version. That allows developers to have a friction-free experience and move fast. So I think that that helps cover that. What else do we got here, Danielle?
What are NPM's goals on processing the security of progressing the security of the registry?
So I think that, it's all about incremental security. It's all about incremental progress. Security is not a destination. It's a journey. It's a process. It's a way of looking at things. And you have to continuously, I think about it like this, like you're going up an escalator backwards. And if you have to keep moving or you end up back at the bottom, and you'll never reach the top. It's a very tiresome journey. And so you need to keep applying and improving security, right? I realize it's a very sort of generic answer, but that's really our mentality, is that we're going to listen to our users. We're going to listen to their needs, right? We're already noticing the need for, license and compliance type controls and tooling. So we're going to listen to our users and we're going to apply that, but we're not going to forget about, the developers as well, and the need for what made NPM and the JavaScript ecosystem great in the first place, which was that frictionless experience to be able to install packages and use them and rapidly develop. So we want you to be able to build amazing things, but build amazing things safely.
Here's another question. How does NPM handle security issues differently than organizations like JFrog?
So we have the attention, like I said, the attention of those 11 million developers, and we hear about things before anybody else does, I think. Nobody's finding, a piece of malware or doing research on data stored in those registries. They're looking at our registries, and they're communicating to us about things that they find. And so we're able to get that signal. Our tooling is able to see those packages on publish. We know where things are being published from, so we're able to detect anomalies, detect sources there and patterns, and then we're able to triage them extremely quickly and get those out through our tooling.
Great. Don't see any more questions.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Adam. As mentioned earlier, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session. It is accessible through the same link that you're using now. We've also added some related material, including today's slides, which are available through the attachment tab at the bottom of your screen. Our next webinar will be on Tuesday, May 14th at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 12 p.m. Central Time, and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can register right through the attachment link. Finally, if you like what you heard today, please tweet out your thoughts using the hashtag NPMSAP, and thank you for joining.